Hey everybody, it's Matt from the house, and in this video we're going to show you a little bit about detuning your edges and when you should, when you shouldn't, and what parts. Let's check this out. Alright, so I just got my new Chamonix Kraken Carbon. Can't wait to try this thing out. I got my bindings all mounted up, centered, and straps all adjusted. Board's, factory waxed, so no need to do that. Usually the factory wax on your board is, pretty good for your first few times out riding. But big thing that you want to do, and you don't have to do it, but I'd like to do, is detune your edges. So obviously when that board comes right from the factory, this edge all the way around, you got a nice brand new edge. It's nice and sharp. You can always tell too, if you take your fingernail and put it at like a 45-degree angle and kind of give it a little scrape back and forth, it peels up your fingernail. That means your edge is sharp. So good way to tell if your edge is sharp. If you're not sure, you think you might need a wax. If you do that and it doesn't peel your fingers up, it's not sharp. So good time to get it to get your edges sharpened. But detuning, basically, there's a couple different instances where you want to detune your edges. Obviously, if you're not carving all the time and maybe you're riding those harder, icier conditions, there's not much detuning that you want to do. You want that edge to be nice and sharp so it can dig and just cut right into the ice. But right off the bat, pretty much anybody can benefit from it. Just kind of doing the nose and the tail of the board. So the biggest thing you want to do here is you want to detune the edges that are not touching the snow and that you don't use. Obviously, when you're out riding, nobody's up carving on the tips of your board. So when you look at your board and you look at your side cut, obviously your side cut is basically from, it's your effective edge too. It's basically where your carve starts and where your carve ends. And that's the part you want digging into the snow the most. And you can kind of tell that by setting the board flat and then just tipping it up and then looking, and you can actually see those points where, where the board is actually touching, or where it should be touching the snow. So right there, that's probably where you want your edge to, that's where you want it to be sharp, all the time, unless you're not carving or you're never riding icing conditions. If you're riding park or street, your edges really don't matter anyway. But for the most part, usually you want to keep that area is going to be, the most important to keep the sharpest. So detuning your tips is just as simple as kind of set that spot, notice where that is, mark it with your finger, and then flip your board over, and then we're just going to take a nice big file like this one, or obviously I have some of the other files that you can buy to sharpen your edges. You can literally pull that little file out and use that as well. But essentially you're basically gonna find where we have that spot, and we're gonna take a 45-degree angle on your edge, and we're just gonna dull it. That's what detuning is it's just dulling your edge. So basically I found right there, that's my contact point. So we're gonna go pretty much anywhere from there all the way around the tip to the other contact point. So again, 45-degree angle, and then just go to town on this thing. Okay, so now that you've done that, basically we've gone from, just outside your contact point all the way around to just outside your contact point. Got the nose done. Do the same thing on the tail as well, pretty easy. The nice thing about that and why we do that is, one, you don't need that sharp edge, but two, if you're jumping and you're spinning and you're coming around, let's say you're coming around on a little bit of a spin and you're gonna come up a little bit short, we don't want that edge catching up there. There's definitely some instances where you could stick that on the snow, and if you're up on it buttering around, you never ever want that edge to grab. So that's why we detune that part, because it can get in the way. Most of the time it's not gonna, but it can. So it can't hurt to just take it down. So we've done that both on the nose and the tail. So next up, this is the big thing, is when it comes to riding rails and riding hard features, whether it's made out of plastic or metal or wood, your edge can dig into it, you know, especially if you're doing a board slide on a, you know, like a metal rail, and as you're coming down that thing, if you don't have your pressure just right, it can dig in and it can cut into the rail, which can not only, you know, mess up your board, but it can also mess up the rail for the next guy too. So depending on, you know, what kind of tricks you're doing, and also depending on the board, depends on how much of your actual edge you're gonna detune. So the more you detune that edge, obviously the less chance you have of catching on rails and stuff. But it also depends on, you know, the kind of tricks that you are doing as well. One big thing to remember, especially when detuning in between your contact points, once you round those things off, depending on how much you do it, they're never coming back. If you know, I know a lot of guys who take angle grinders and just buzz that thing down, and if your edge is usually like this, and you buzz it to, you know, so it looks like that, there's no coming back. There's no really making that sharp again. If you just kind of dull it down just a little bit, usually as long as it's not too much, if you ever want that edge to be sharp again, a lot of times you can, you know, get that sharp again. You probably want to take it to your local shop just to have them, you know, throw it on a, like a grind right machine, and, you know, something a little bit more than just your standard little, you know, home tuning files. But for me, this board, I'm planning on definitely riding some park with this thing. Definitely want to hit some rails, but I don't want to limit myself. And most of the stuff that I do is either 50/50s, or when I'm doing board slides, I usually keep it, you know, kind of in between my feet. I'm usually not out of my nose too much. Every once in a while I like to, but I feel a little bit more confident when I'm out there that I'm not gonna catch that edge and I'm up on the nose and tail. So usually what I do is I kind of go from foot to foot. I kind of leave it sharp up in those contact point areas, and then just make sure that anywhere from foot to foot, so when you're doing a proper board slide, you're right in between there. None of that's gonna catch. And I don't do it a whole lot because, you know, maybe I want this board to be sharp again someday. But again, I've been riding for a while, and I'm not bragging, but, you know, I feel a little bit more comfortable on rails. So I like to have just a little bit of that, more of that mental thing, like, yeah, it's rounded off, you're not gonna catch an edge. But again, it's really just personal preference, and you just do, you know, whatever feels, you know, most comfortable to you. So again, we're gonna start, for me, I start right at my foot. I can see right where that is because of the binding. And I basically just go from foot to foot. And again, kind of give it that 45, and I actually go this way. I don't go this way, just to kind of round it away from the base of the board. And when you've got nice lights like these ones in the studio here, you can actually see where that edge is still sharp, and you can also see where you've dulled it off. You actually start to get a reflection, because now there's, instead of just this surface and this surface, now we have a flat surface here that we can catch the light off of. So if you do have a light kind of off to the side, just like when we talked about the waxing videos, being able to see your wax and where you waxed, it definitely can help, because you can see exactly, you know, where you've already detuned and where you still need to. All right, so that's a nice and dull, well, not super dull, but, you know, like I said, we've dulled it off a little bit just to give it that little more of a catch-free feel. And now my board's ready to ride. So like I was saying in the video, it's really up to you as to what you want to detune and the level of detuning that you want to do. Another thing that you can do too is if you go to, you know, if you've got, your local shop has a really nice grind right machine where they're got like a belt grinder where they're grinding the edges very, very precise. A lot of times they have settings on it too, where you can actually angle your edges. So it's another thing that you can do if you want your edges to be sharp. So essentially your edge is coming flat like this. A lot of times they could do like a negative, you know, 3-degree bevel on it. And basically what that does is it takes your edge and it keeps it sharp, but it actually sharpens it on a little bit of an angle. Instead of at that full 90 degrees, can drop it back to about, you know, 87 degrees. Essentially what that does is that lifts the edge up, so when you are sitting the board flat, the edge actually isn't touching But you can still, once you lift it up and get it on that edge, you can still leave it a little sharp. So some of the companies have done that in the past where the board actually comes pre-tuned with that, you know, a little bit of that 3-degree bevel on there. So again, a little more catch free without having to detune your edges. But it's something I actually haven't seen in a while. But again, another possibility, you know, definitely check with your local shop. All right, so remember on your board when you're detuning, you know, the amount of detune up here in the nose doesn't really matter. In between your contact points, that's where it matters the most. That's where your board carves. Your contact points, that's where your carve starts and ends. You need those to be sharp, especially on those harder and icier conditions. If you're riding park all day and you've got another board for riding outside of the park, go ahead and dull the heck out of those things. But always remember, you can dull it to the point where it can't come back and it's never gonna be sharp again. So good thing to keep in mind when you're when you're doing this to your board. So if you got any questions about this or any of the other videos, you know, leave us some comments down below. We're on there every single day trying to answer your questions. You know, we want to make sure we get you to the best gear possible, but we want to make sure that you're having fun and your gear is going to perform well for you as well. Like, subscribe, get that bell on so you can find out when all the new videos drop, and you already know it. No matter what kind of riding you're doing, whether you're riding rails or you're out railing ice, get out and ride, because every day of riding is a good day riding.